Maybe you can't stop the world in its tracks, but you can take the alternate route in an Audi 200 Avant. It's designed to move with boat-like agility and the aerodynamics of a large brick. Welcome unreliability, ignoring warning lights, and taking the alternate route.
Today we're back at it again. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about my 1989 Audi 200. For those of you that are unfamiliar with older Audi chassis, the 200 came standard with a 2.2 liter inline 5 10-valve engine, K24 turbo, Audi's famous Quattro all-wheel drive system, a 5-speed manual transmission, and they slammed it all together in a package big enough to register as a land yacht. Around August of last year, I bought this car for $950. I currently have a little bit over $2,000 invested in it, along with a lot of my time wrenching on it, fixing problems and stuff. Despite being listed in the for sale ad as having no mechanical issues, this car had plenty of them. So I picked up the car in Columbus, Ohio. First time I went down to go look at it, the car was dead on arrival. It wouldn't start, it wouldn't crank, it wouldn't do anything. So I said, I don't want anything to do with this, I'm just gonna go back home, find something else. A couple days later, everyone convinced me that I should put in an offer and go get it. So I accepted my offer, we hooked up the truck and trailer. 4 hours later, I came home with what I think is the best and also the worst winter beater of the group. The exhaust was banging off everything underneath the car. Drivetrain had a bunch of slop. Brakes barely worked, boost leaks, didn't idle well. And when we got back, after the test drive, I was walking around the car and got to the back of the car, and right there on the ground were the rear brake pads. So the first thing you're gonna notice about the exterior of the car is the rust. It's not doing so hot down here in this front fender. This is definitely the worst out of all the exterior stuff. Put my finger in this fender and get a bunch of crunchy bits in there. It's kind of in random spots all over the car, like the roof rails, the rear hatch, a couple spots here and there. But the real rust is underneath. The next thing you're gonna notice about the exterior is the paint. Some of it looks really good. Granted, it's dirty, but other parts of it, like the roof and these two rear panels, are starting to do this weird cracking thing. Not really sure what's going on at all, but it's one of my favorite parts about the exterior of this car is the mirrors, as stupid as that sounds. Not only do they fold in like traditional mirrors, they also go forward, up, down, and if you want it to go all the way around, you can do that too. And as long as you don't mess them up in the process, they go back to where they're supposed to. Another thing you'll notice about this side of the car is that the lower half of it is painted black, all the way to the rear bumper. The other side's paint matched to the white. Something else you'll notice about the outside of this car is either the missing broken trim pieces or the trim pieces back here that have turned into a full wave and actually shrunk. Also, this gas tank door, currently held shut with a magnet. And if you go to put gas in this filler neck, it's not gonna go anywhere. It's just gonna get dumped right onto the floor. That's because I had to take the original tank out to try to seal it. Found out it was completely rusted through and was junk. You can't find Audi 200 gas tanks anymore, so this is my solution. eBay fuel cell, took out all the factory plumbing lines, replaced it with -10 AN and a Bosch 044. Something that older Audi owners will appreciate is the Quattro logo in the rear defroster. I think the top half of the defrosters work really well. I don't think the bottom half works, but at least it looks cool. We also have these sweet red painted badges. It's got an S-line badge, so you know it's fast. And Quattro in red because racing. The other day, when my starter didn't work, I had to push the car into the garage myself. And in the process of that, I broke the taillight trying to push it in. So currently, looking for a replacement on that. So up front, we have more missing trim pieces. Actually, this is a missing trim piece that's been covered in foil tape, so it looks like the trim was there. And then we have this magnificent gem of a hood pull that works most of the time, surprisingly. And it's actually just a piece of wire with a coat hanger, because I'm missing the piece that pulls the two latches open. But again, you can't find that part anywhere. There's a lot going on under the hood here, as you can see. This is the 2.2 liter inline 5 MC engine code. It's got the K24 turbo, and my first goal with the car was to get it back to running condition. It had a whole bunch of leaks on the intake side, which is really important for CIS fuel injection to work properly. It had a radiator that was leaking. I did a general clean out of the entire intake tract, including doing the injectors, cups, and seals. So that's all new stuff. And then we also did a timing belt just to make sure that things weren't going to explode, because it's who knows how old or how many miles it had on it. The car didn't have a heater core in it, it was bypassed. Well, it had a heater core, but it was leaking. So I had to take out the whole heater core, which actually doesn't involve going behind the dash. On this car, it's underneath the center back here. You can take the whole HVAC unit out and get at it from there. But we also had a massive power steering leak, and I ended up replacing the entire rack because you can't just buy seals for these. A couple of hard lines for that, valve cover gasket, expansion tank, fuel filter, just belts, pulleys, temperature sensors, spark plugs, wires, the list goes on. So overall, this has been a huge time suck for me. It's required a ton of maintenance that I wasn't originally planning on doing, but we're here. We got it running pretty good. Right now it's back up to running its full 0.8 bar boost, and it did pretty well at the drag strip too. It ran a 1582 at 87 miles per hour. For a sub 200 horsepower car, that's not bad at all. I'm pretty happy with it. See how long that lasts though. Let's get it up on the lift, take a look at the underside. You can see here we have a whole bunch of sketchy wiring bits, especially going to the starter. I've relocated this oil cooler that was running into the tire of this line over here. Most of the bushings are completely cooked. They're probably original to the car. Everything's covered in grease, oil, grime, all that good stuff. This is a new exhaust I made out of some crappy aluminized pipe. 130 bucks in materials for the whole thing with 2 V-bands. Can't really complain there. The exhaust that came on the car was probably less than 2 inches and was just one piece welded to the downpipe the entire way back. And that's what was causing a whole bunch of the clunks and banging underneath the car, along with the super blown out trans mounts that now have these 034 street density bits in there. So as we move towards the back of the car, pretty much everything is straight piped on the exhaust. We put this vibrant resonator in, tone things down a little bit, make it sound really good without going crazy on muffling it too much. And then back here you can see that's where the fuel cell used to go. I had to drop the whole subframe out to get it out, and it was a huge pain. But you can see the new fuel cell lines over here run into now what is an external pump, the Bosch 044. It's all high pressure stuff, so CIS system all runs about 90 PSI fuel pressure. So this is a really cool feature that some of the older Audis came with. It is a mechanical diff lock. Even though this bracket's really floppy and this valve doesn't quite work, I've zip tied the arm into a position that locks the rear diff. So it's essentially like having a temporary welded diff. A lot of new cars don't have that. You can press a button up in the center console and it just mechanically locks the 2 rear wheels together, so you have even better all-wheel drive. So courtesy of one of the previous owners of this car, the rear bumper is held on by a camo tow strap, keeping it classy. And this guy right here, this thing has done some shit. You'll see that at a later episode. So just like the front of the car, All the bushings back here, like you can see, are pretty well cooked. Just all the control arms and stuff on the car are not great. And that made doing alignment really hard. So all the arms up in here and the toe adjustment, everything's just super seized, super difficult. And when I first got the car, I had about 3 degrees of camber on the right rear that I had to fix. So the interior, the first thing that people notice is that clicking sound. That's the alarm trying to go off, but the horn isn't hooked up, so it actually can't. And it just clicks for about 2 minutes unless I pull the central locking fuse, which the door locks don't work anyway, so I don't know why I haven't done that. The next thing they usually notice is the massive number of windshield cracks I have on that side. But the driver's side is perfectly fine, so we're just gonna leave it, not worry about it. The radio screen works for short periods sometimes. Most of the time it doesn't at all, but the radio itself works. It's never really been secured at all, just kind of hangs out in there. Came with the car and we're gonna leave it. Shifter, every time you shift this thing, you're not really sure what gear you're in. It could be third, could be first, fifth, I don't know. These used to be the heated seat buttons that were sacrificed for the ignition switch and a push button start that was hanging out of the dash. To fix that, I actually had to replace the lock cylinder completely. The back side of the lock cylinder has a tab that turns the ignition switch, and that actually broke off of the lock cylinder. So for a short period of time there, I actually had taken this wiring out, got a new ignition switch, found out the lock cylinder was broken, and I was starting it with the switch hanging out, a little screwdriver for the key. So that's why that's in there. Just recently got back to that. Odometer says 90,474 miles. I think that everyone is in agreement that that's not the case at all. We're probably closer to 300,000 if I had to guess. There's a nice little digital boost gauge in here that actually does work. So I know when I'm making some kind of boost. We have coolant temp, we have oil pressure, we have voltage. Since I have the eBay fuel cell, I get 0 reading on the fuel gauge. So I usually just go until I get fuel cut and then I run to a gas station. So as we come to the back seat on the interior, you can see we have the essentials back here. Snow brush, extra coolant in case we spring a leak, never know. Fire extinguisher for when things get spicy. Tow straps when you're gonna tow cars out, which happens more often than you'd think. And the good old trusty e-brake. Literally never fails. You'll also notice that my tools are missing. That's because my doors don't lock and some scumbag in Akron decided to steal them. So that's wonderful. That's what I get for driving the winter beater. Also, you can see back here, there's about 30 staples holding up the headliner. They're hanging on there, kinda. All right, so that's gonna do it for the ultimate winter beater. Now that you guys know everything that's wrong with it, I'm taking deposits, so hit me up.